to get it off my chest, I've been an EV driver for 5 years, so I've got all the scars, as I'm sure quite a few people have in this room. I work for Nottingham City Council, as has been said, and it's probably fair to say we've been quite lucky in Nottingham. At a time when lots of local authorities are facing austerity, they're facing cuts in their funding, they're facing decisions like shutting nursing homes, cutting education budgets, cutting social care. Whereabouts does EV fit in this? As we've already heard, there's a potential disparity between provision for what could be perceived as wealthy second car owners. Does a council and a Labour council want to be supporting that? I have quite a lot of emails and Twitter. We've got quite active social media messages saying, "You're doing great stuff in Nottingham. Why isn't my council doing it?" And my answer is, we were lucky. We've got the money. We're quite good at winning funding, but the funding is always, pretty much always, competitive bids between cities. Now, when Grant Shapps says, "Why do we have postcode lottery for charging, or we should eradicate this?" the simple answer is, it's a competition, and you have more losers than you have winners. So that's why there's a postcode lottery. There are other reasons behind it, particularly around charging. So rural areas and that kind of thing, but where there's no electricity. But there is an issue that the expectation on local authorities. The question really is: should local authorities be the people who put in EV charging to encourage the uptake? I'll just kind of leave that hanging. So what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is not only how we help businesses make the switch, but some of the work we've done in the city as well. But why Nottingham? Well, I guess it's to show that there are other places outside Milton Keynes that are doing good stuff. We're the only city in the UK that's taken on board the piece of 20-year-old legislation that every city has been able to use, which is the workplace parking levy. So for every commuter space at a business where there's more than 10 spaces, there's a £415 a year charge on that car parking space, which goes to the council. Some businesses pass the direct cost on to the employee. Some businesses pay it for the employee. But it all ends up in the same place. And what we do is we hypothecate that into things like extending our tram network, investing in electric buses. I think Nottingham and Brighton are the only two areas outside London where public transport use is increasing. And that's because we've been able to invest in an efficient, reliable, clean, modern transport system. Sorry, that's a misprint. We're not the only city in the UK. So we're one of 4 cities in the UK that. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Sorry. Yes, we are the only city in the UK to have a go ultra low lane. I think I've put 2 points in there. Anyway, that's a grammatical error that I've done. So we are the only city in the UK to have a shared ultra low emission vehicle lane. And this was part of the bidding process for our Go Ultra Low City status. And it was a suggestion from the government that they wanted to see if uptake would increase by doing some of the things that happened in Norway. As you may be aware, in Norway, it's been, and I'm sure Christine will back me up on this, it's been very successful. So successful that the bus lanes were clogged up with electric vehicles, much to the annoyance of the bus companies, which now, I'm right in saying this, but I think it's now been turned into a high occupancy electric vehicle lane. So you've got to have more than one driver in the car. So we're not at that situation yet, but we've started doing that. It's been interesting. We've had, despite ANPR cameras monitoring the lane, we still get conventional fueled vehicle drivers sliding over and gesticulating out of the window with one or more fingers to the drivers saying, "You shouldn't be in that lane." So we've had to redo some more signs. We've had to put stickers on the back of the cars. And that seems to have worked it out. But it's something that we kind of didn't take account of in the first instance. So to get in that ultra-low emission vehicle lane, vehicles have to be less than 75 grams per kilometre of CO2 and zero emission capable for 10 miles or more. So it's only the cleanest hybrids and electric and the odd hydrogen. We've also got one of the largest electric and biogas bus fleets in the world. I think we've got the largest biogas double-decker fleet in the world when I last checked. We've got an active program of our own fleet replacement because we want to be exemplars for this. It's no good going out to business and others to say you need to do X, Y, and Z to clean up your fleet. We've now got over 25% of our vehicles are now electric, and we're looking at the sort of more unusual vehicles. We're looking at refuse collection vehicles. We have street sweepers. We have vans, cage tippers, where go out into parks and they put all the leaves in and they can tip at those the end-use sites. So we're looking at all the different types of vehicles, not just conventional cars and light vans. And I have to say that's kind of kicked off with a bit of work that Cenex did for us. I know when Luke was at Cenex and Jacob at Cenex now, where they did a fleet review for all our vehicles, and the fleet manager said, if I can take something back to the accountants that shows I'm making a saving here, we can do this. The end result of the fleet review was all light vans and cars would all be electric, and that has kind of now fostered an EV mentality amongst our fleet guys who really had got diesel flowing through their veins and didn't want to look at anything else. They're now completely EV savvy. We've just spent, talking about substations, we've just spent £750,000 on upgrading our substation and supplying to our depot so that we can roll out more EVs. So they've come on board. Workplace travel service grants, I'll come on to that later. We are supporting the taxi strategy and a financial support package for hackneys in particular. We've realised that they are a very old fleet, some up to 17, 20 years old. We want to get them off the road. We're providing a range of incentives. We're providing dedicated charging for taxis as well. And recently we've been given the accolade. We didn't calculate this. It was an external body. We've got the most charging points outside London, and hopefully by March 2020 we'll have even more. Referring to what Jacob said, we've also got a car club which has got some EVs in it, and they're in areas of deprivation also. So when we go out to speak to businesses, pretty much many of you will know this, but these are the headline messages we get back from businesses. Cost purchase too high. We all know that, as been said today, the higher purchase costs are offset by cheaper running costs. That's going to be about 20%. And interestingly, that's also why a lot of dealerships, going back to what Luke was saying, have been kind of a bit reluctant to sell the cars, because the 20% running cost savings means there's no air filter, no oil filter, no clutch, no gearbox. So they don't need any after-sales work. So a lot of dealerships have been, anecdotally, a bit reluctant to sell electric cars, because they don't actually make that much money on selling a new car. It's all of the extra work afterwards. And then they want to know about depreciation. As many of you will also know, that EVs have now started to keep the price and actually increase in value in the second-hand market. So that's an interesting development, which I think will have an influence on uptake. And also, don't they have a limited range, as we know, as again said this morning. That's increasing. Will EVs fit into their driving patterns? Follows on from the last point. As the range grows, it will fit in with the duty cycles. We've dealt with a lot of businesses that have given this summary of all of these responses really here, and that's kind of one of the things that they're most concerned with. Is once they know where they can charge it, they want to know about the range and what's it like in winter, what's it like when the heater's on, what's it like when it's under full load if it's a van, that kind of things. The big one that we shouldn't underestimate is the EV bubble. We don't know enough. There's a massive culture change amongst the public and amongst businesses. So the change from filling up with hydrocarbons from a pump to filling up from a cable with electrons does require a mindset shift. There's also a need for myth busting. There is a lot of myths out there. Obviously, a lot of people's first experience of seeing an EV would have been Jeremy Clarkson pushing a flat leaf, and that's kind of stuck in the mind. Either that or a milk float. So it's no surprising, really, that there's a kind of a lack of public perception and a good level of knowledge around EVs. And that is a big thing amongst the general public. Obviously, fleet managers are a bit more tuned into that. They get the information through their publications and through their networks. But for the members of the public, it is a real issue. And then there's the but question. But these electric vehicles are still powered by fossil fuels. Now I want to show you just this cartoon. So that's the kind of conventional wisdom that we have now. Diesels are much dirty and you've got the tailpipe emissions. But then the counter-argument is, but you're getting it from these coal-fired power stations, aren't you? And I think some ingenious EV driver amended the picture to show the real scenario. So rather than just the tailpipe, he shows it coming from the rig, the tanker, refinery, the transportation, and a lot of the energy now that we're plugging to overnight to charge our cars, which most people do, it comes from sustainable energy. I was listening to Fully Charged, the blog that they do, and the podcast that they do, and Robert Llewellyn gave me an interesting fact there where he said the tankers run on the kind of, once it's gone through the refinery and you've got all the nice petrol and diesel out of it, what you're left with is the thick gunk, almost crude oil that runs the tankers. They run on really kind of dirty fuel, but 32% of all tanker movements across the world, 32% of all shipping movements across the world are done by tankers carrying this stuff around to put in here. And that strikes me as being super inefficient and not very clean. So again, going back to businesses, their concerns around charging. Are there enough charging points? Probably at the moment, we probably have to say no. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago where Colin Heron said, what is the right number of charge points? He gave an open question to the floor, and there was various different answers. Nobody could really answer. How many do we need? There's been kind of all sorts of guesses. But I would say that despite a lack of a coherent national strategy and interoperability and all things work together and everybody all being on the same page, we've still got almost 30,000 connection points in the ground. Whereas in 2018, there were only 6,500. So, you know, even though we're kind of fudging along, I think it's still happening. So imagine what will happen once we do get everything sorted out, once we all are singing from the same hymn sheet. In Nottingham, we've installed 350 in the past 18 months in about 100 locations. But there remains some parts of the country, especially in rural areas, if you're an EV driver and you look at ZapMap, you will know there's big gaps in mid-Wales and in Norfolk and in Cornwall and in the Peak District. We're trying to fill that at the moment with some rapid charges in the Peak District. But the government has announced, as has been said earlier, there will be another round of funding to put in rapid charges. And I know it's been said in some quarters that 7 kilowatt, 22 kilowatt is no good. Well, actually, I think there are some situations where they work. So we've got, for example, park and ride facilities on the edge of Nottingham, where we've installed 7 kilowatt charge points. People are driving in there, parking up at 9 o'clock, coming back at 5:30, picking the car up. We've looked at our network, about 20,000 individual charging sessions. We've got about 10 kilowatts as the average draw. So people aren't turning up to these charge points empty. They're coming to the charge points and just topping up. So you don't necessarily have to have a bank of rapid chargers at every single location. Question that we get asked around costs for install. As I've said, we spent just shy of £750,000 putting a substation into our depot, so we know this is an issue. Obviously, there is the government grants for installation of the individual charging points. Is that enough to cover it if you have to have a big electrical upgrade? Probably not. We have a workplace travel service grant where we're providing grants greater than what the government is supporting at the moment. And it's been very successful. Again, it was bidded competitively against other councils. It's coming to an end on the 31st of March next year. But so far, We've paid out £437,000 to 40 businesses. This is a month out of date, so it's more than that. And we've installed 115 charge points. It was for other sustainable transport measures, because we shouldn't just get fixated on cars being the answer all the time. So cycle shelters, e-bikes, showers, things like display boards for local public transport times and receptions and that kind of thing. So we've done a wide range of interventions and help for businesses. But as I say, large numbers of installations of charge points at the same site may require an increase in the grid capacity, and you should be mindful of that too. This is an issue for, and I know local councils, is drivers taking vehicles home. As councils get cut back, they rationalise depots, try and put them all onto one site. If there's not enough parking space overnight, the vehicles are then taken home. So it's about actually having smart charge points that were fitted to staff members' homes, and then they can actually itemise their electricity use so that they don't end up footing the bill for the company or the council. So it is possible. So what else have we done in Nottingham? I've said we've got the ultra-low emission vehicle lane. It's ANPR enforced, and interestingly, that sign there was produced by the Department for Transport after focus groups, when they said what would be the easiest thing to recognise for ultra-low emission vehicles. So they had things with plugs on it, they had things with a car in it, and at the end of the session, they came up with ULEV in a green circle. Now, our experience shows that people who like to take the law into their own hands and cut in front of EV drivers don't know what ULEV means. In fact, there's been some research that says ULEV drivers don't know what ULEV means. So we were very surprised, but that was the DFT in their wisdom, they decided that that was the right moniker to go on there. But we've had to put additional signs in, and we've had to make magnetic and sticky versions of that to go into backs of people's cars, so that the cars behind them can see that it matches what's shown in the ULEV lane. Quite surprising, but that's what was decided. Like I said, we also like to lead by example. We are converting our fleet actively. Here's, I think, one of the first electric street sweepers that we've got in the UK, and that's one of our cage tippers there. We've had lots of public events in Old Market Square, if you know the city. And one of our big pushes really has been on education and engagement. We've done a number of public engagement events where probably 2-3 years ago, everybody walked up to the event, got their camera out on the phone, saw the Tesla doors open, took a picture, walked off. Now what we're doing is, what we're seeing is they come up to the Tesla, they take a picture, they look into it, and then they walk over to the cars that are cheaper and are saying, I need to do something around changing my new car into an electric vehicle, because they've heard of the Volkswagen emissions scandal, they've heard of the air pollution issues, they've heard of the 2040 targets, and all these other things are having a drip effect on the mindset of the members of the public, pushing them in a positive way. What we've got to make sure is that we unpick all the myths along the way as well. We have a new taxi strategy where we are asking, we're making any new taxis that want to operate in Nottingham to work to either Euro 6 or to be ULEVs to that same criteria, so they can run on the ULEV lane, less than 75 grams per kilometre, and have the zero capability for more than 10 miles. We've also got a try before you buy scheme for our Hackney cab drivers, totaling £3,500, and everything from putting in new radios to providing them with charge points at their homes, and if they haven't got off-street parking, providing them with prepaid cards to use EVs, to use EV charging infrastructure. We're also opening our ULEV service centre. So our fleet guys, it's in their same depot where we've upgraded the 750,000 substation. They're really on board with this, and they can see that the second-hand market and also the taxi market that they serve anyway, and their own fleet, there's going to be a desire for people not to use main dealers for having a car serviced. So in a few weeks, our facility should be open. The NEVs, the Nottingham Electric Vehicle Services, so as it says there, we'll offer MOTs and servicing to people from across the city and beyond. We're also in discussions with ambulance service, fire service, and all those sort of people who've made the switch to EV for some of their vehicles. So we see that as a growing area. And finally, will we be all driving electric cars in the future? As Toddington says, a couple of years ago it would have probably been controversial, but I think probably now we accept that's the way it's going to go. It will be the road to zero. And thank you very much.